Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today is podcast number 1720. The topic is nutrition, and the title is, To Find the Best Diet, You Must Fail. Bum, 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 bum. No one likes failure, but I'm going to tell you through today's podcast that it is part of the process, and in order for you to be your best, you actually have to fail. Yes. So I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was three bodybuilding athletes and coaches, and they were discussing their different dieting approaches and opinions. And I love that stuff. It's super fun. One of my, this is all I do all day. It's ridiculous. I understand more and more how weird it is the more I'm around other people that I don't do anything else. Like, it's very interesting to me, even, 20 plus years into this. But the three people talking were James Hollingshead, and he is still a competitive bodybuilder, and he competes at the Mr. Olympia. He's a pretty badass looking dude. Mila Sarchev, who I grew up watching and freaking love this guy. He's completely insane sometimes with his giant sets and training styles, and his nutrition is extremely fun to see because he's, as he admits, he's more of a bro science kind of guy because he doesn't have degrees and stuff in what he does, but it certainly works, and for a lot of the athletes he coaches it works. It's just fun to see how he bends and kind of plays with the rules of nutrition in order to get the extremes out of it. So he's really cool to listen to. And then Chris Tuttle. So these three coaches, and like James Hollingshead, even though he's still competitive, he still coaches people as well. So awesome perspective because they've all done it themselves, and they're all now coaching and working with a lot of other people. So just insane amount of knowledge. So what's neat is James, who's still competitive out of the three, is struggling to continue to grow. He's like 300 pounds with six-pack abs. So these guys are on every supplementation you could take that doesn't immediately kill you. But it's still awesome to hear how they manipulate nutrition. And to a more calmed down degree, it's the same stuff that we would have to do if we weren't taking drugs. But it's fun to see, even at extremes, what they run into, and then you can kind of take their answers and solutions and kind of make it more normal life, so to speak. And it's really cool to see how they solve the problems and how you can use them, those solutions. So he's been struggling to eat more. And part of it is his digestive issues. He says that he just can't process his food fast enough. He's eating, and then by the time he needs to eat again, he still feels like the food is in his stomach, and like in his intestines, it's still sitting in him. So he feels like if he eats more, it's just putting food on top of food on top of food. He gets bloated, gets gassy, just nothing goes well for him, and he is just struggling with how to approach that. Now, what's interesting is, as he was telling the other three, the other two, what his diet was, he said he eats only about 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein. Now, for competitive bodybuilders, this is incredibly low. Now, can you find some that do that? Yes, absolutely. Yes, you can. You can also find some that eat 3 grams per pound of body weight, and there's everybody in between. But 1 gram per pound of body weight for a competitive bodybuilder, especially when they're taking all of the drugs in the world that can increase protein synthesis, which means the conversion of dietary protein to muscle tissue, they're taking drugs that maximize the hell out of that process. So to be under-consuming protein would be is like you're just leaving results on the table. It's like, oh my God, you're taking all these drugs, you're eating, you're doing all these workouts, but you're just not eating enough protein, and there's this window of growth that is just being unfulfilled. And you can hear it in like the pain of the other voices of like, oh my God, you could be so much bigger, and they all want to solve the problem, so they're all excited to try to figure it out. Now, what they're trying to figure out is how can he eat more? Like I said, most competitive, taking whatever you want to take, bodybuilders, they're going to be eating anywhere, and this is all, it's all relative, and it's all, anything in life, you're going to have spectrum, and there's a lot of people like the bell curve of the spectrum, there's a lot of people in the middle, and then there's some extremes, but in general, they're going to be eating between like 1.5 grams up to 3 grams per pound of body weight in protein. And that's because they have the drugs in their system that are helping them synthesize and convert the protein at a faster rate. So they need more protein than what you hear me typically recommend. Now, James, his idea, I'm narrowing down what they said because the podcast was over an hour long, but James's approach right now has been to hold his food the same and to add more movement. He's been adding more walking and more just like really low steady state cardio, and that's going to help promote digestion. He has a little more kind of caloric demand. He has a lot more, like a little more movement, and that actually helps food move through our digestive tract easier because you're not relying on the muscular contractions of the digestive tract as much as you're also just moving around and creating movement on your own. So we have heard, like through Stan Efferding and other proponents, like Mark Bell's a proponent of 10-minute walks after you eat, and that's true. It does help with digestion. They've done enough studies, and there's enough anecdotal evidence that stands true. Is that when you when you go for a walk after eating, or when you move after eating, it helps just process the food faster. So he started doing more walking, and he said it's only been a couple weeks, but he already feels an increase in hunger, and he's hoping that then he'll be able to start to add more food. Now, out of the rest of the podcast, that seemed like a very kind of boring answer, because Milos was super excited to kind of play this game because since he coaches so many people, and his theory through nutrition is to get as much food in his athletes as possible, however much they can possibly get their body to use. So, for example, he uses a lot of insulin around workouts to help push and drive macronutrient digestion and macronutrient delivery to muscle tissues. But Milos recommended that James should drink a lot of liquid amino acids, like essential amino acids, throughout the day. And the reason why is because they don't cause you to be full. It's just like if you were going to drink water, you just put this essential amino acid powder into the water, and then you just drink it. So it's really fast digestibility, like usage rate to the body, and it's not going to make him any more full than he already is, and it'll give a good boost to his daily protein, and they can afford to drink in a stupid amount of that stuff. So like a typical $30 serving container of essential amino acids is going to be somewhere between $20 to $30. So you're looking, if I had to guesstimate some prices, you're looking at 66 cents to $1 for like just 5 grams of protein. So let's say it's $1 for 5 grams of protein. If he wants him to drink, 5 to 10 of those drinks a day, to try to get, which isn't uncommon because these guys are drinking, upwards of 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons of water or more. So if he wants him to put a scoop or two in for every liter of water, all of a sudden that adds up pretty quick, and that can be pretty expensive. You're talking about over $100 a month just in essential amino acids, and that's a conservative price range. But these guys can afford it. They have a ton of sponsorships. They're not going to worry about that. So he said, start getting that in. That can help. And then start playing with your macro timing, like when you eat, what macros you eat. So, for example, around training, he would recommend that James do really high carb intake because they're using the insulin, and that would be his highest times of food volume, trying to get energy and nutrients into the muscles to have the most aggressive workouts and to fuel both the energy needed for the workout and the energy needed immediately after the workout for recovery. And then away from the workouts, he can swap out carbs for fats. This will allow him to lower his food volume, but he'll maintain, if not actually be able to increase, his calorie intake. So that was one kind of unit of recommendation. Then the group kind of discussed, is utilization of essential amino acids the same as solid food proteins, and give and take. It's kind of like, what does it hurt? If you can't eat any more solid proteins, well, then not eating any more certainly doesn't help, but drinking the essential amino acids can help, for sure. So it's really like there's no need for that argument, considering you've already maxed out solid food proteins. Now, Chris's suggestions. He suggested reducing carbohydrates and replacing with protein. So instead of James, just staying the same and waiting for the cardio to happen, he said, why don't you just take away some of your volume of carbohydrates and replace with volume of protein. You'll have the same food volume, therefore it's not going to be any more stress on digestion, so to speak, and in certain conditions, but it'll get more protein into his system, which can help him grow more. And I thought it was fun they continued and had like a nice long discussion, and I love all that stuff. So me, like, I can nerd out on this all the time, but I don't think it's highly useful for the mass population. So I don't talk about this too often in the podcast because I think I'd be down to like one person caring. But I love this stuff. Love it, love it, love it. And the idea of today's podcast came from that podcast because I wanted to highlight that if you want your diet, if you want the way that you eat to produce the responses that you want, you know, for James' cases, he wants bigger muscles. You might want bigger muscle. You might want fat loss. You might want increased strength, better sport performance. You will have to eat in a way that meets the demand of those adaptations. So if you want to grow, you have to be in a caloric surplus. If you want to lose body fat, you have to be in a caloric deficit. You have to eat enough protein on both of those goals. You know, there's aspects of the diet that you just have to meet if you want a specific adaptation. And in order to do that, you have to try new things. And for some of the new things that you try, you will fail. But by failing, you get to see what didn't work, you adjust, and then you make new improvements, you try new guesses. So for myself, I have very slow digestion. I have gastroparesis, and I have struggled with this, I don't know. I don't know when it started because I don't know when I didn't have it. But I have trouble eating enough food. That's always been my case. When I was younger in high school and I wasn't, as focused into building muscle tissue, I would eat once a day, and I was fine. It didn't bother me. I had no energy problems. I was also only 165 pounds and somehow still like skinny fat. And I know now why, but it was very frustrating at the time. I was 6 foot tall, 165 pounds, and you could grab fat rolls around my waist. I had no visible veins anywhere. So I would have been very, very, very thin. Easily maybe like 125, 135, possibly even lighter than that at 6 foot tall. So I was very, 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 very thin. Now, flash forward to today, I'm 290 pounds. I was actually 290.9 on the scale this morning. So I have been able to grow. I'm much leaner. I actually can see my abs at 290 pounds. I've done a shitload of work in 23 years. So I've put in a lot of work. So don't feel bad for me. I have been able to make it work, but good Lord, has that been a huge pain in the ass along the way. And I still want to see if I continue to grow. Why not, right? But in the process of me adding like over 130 pounds of muscle tissue, I have ran into issue after issue after issue after issue. But by reaching each point of failure, I had to make adjustments and I got to learn something new. And that's helped me help, thousands and thousands of other people, which is a huge blessing. It involved not only hitting like the right macros. That's, you have to hit your right calories, your right protein. You have to do that. But I also have to do it with foods that I like enough to be consistent with. Foods that are convenient, so that way I can actually have my job and do my work. Foods that are actually cost effective, so I can actually afford to eat as much as I need to eat. There's a lot of trial and error that goes into the process. Not just hitting certain macros, but the foods, and make sure you actually like them. Make sure you can digest them. Make sure you can afford them. Make sure they're convenient. If I had to sit down to a Thanksgiving meal every 3 hours, that's not going to work because I have a job. So there's so many aspects to try to make all of this work. But that's okay. That's part of the process. That's exactly what you have to go through. To find the best diet, you must fail. Because those moments of failure are when you hit a wall, and that wall is a representation of the box that you're in. If you want to progress beyond where you are, you can't stay where you are. You can't stay in your box. You cannot stay inside of what's comfortable. You can't keep everything the same and expect new. I've been listening to and watching some videos on the James Webb Telescope. James Webb Telescope. If you don't know what that is, freaking fun stuff. You should deep dive into that. But they sent this really crazy, powerful telescope up into space, and they can see back, like quote unquote, in time, and back towards kind of the beginning of the universe. And it's just really cool because they can see so much further now that a lot of what they're figuring out is kind of disproving theories that they've had so far about the way in which the universe formed. Now, one astrophysicist named Brian Cox has a really good quote that I like. Is he's not a big fan of the Big Bang theory being like how the universe started, because he has a quote that nothing comes from nothing. Meaning, there couldn't have been nothing, and then all of a sudden, bam, all of the elements of all the Earth and all the universe and all of mankind and, everything just originated out of thin air. So his quote was, "Nothing comes from nothing." And I like that quote because that's true. Like, if you do nothing new, you get nothing new. If you're doing nothing, you're going to get nothing. Nothing comes from nothing. So I'm twisting it a little bit because I like the phrasing, but that's good to remember. If you're afraid to try something new, but you want to get new, nothing comes from nothing. I can't do nothing new and get something new. If I want to lose fat, but I just want to eat the same way I've always eaten before, well, that's not going to work. If I want to lose fat, but I'm going to eat the same way I've dieted before. Maybe you've dieted and you've lost 30 pounds before, and you're like, I'm going to do that again because it worked last time. The hell it did. If you gained those 30 pounds back or more, it didn't work, did it? You're like, oh yeah, well, it worked to get the 30 pounds off, but it didn't stay off, therefore it didn't work. Are you dieting just to lose fat for now and then get fatter again in a year or two? No. You're probably doing every damn diet because you want to take the fat off and keep the fat off. So don't do what worked before. That's a very stupid statement because it didn't freaking work. If you're fat again, it didn't work. I'm getting grumpy because I'm thinking of like people that argue with me sometimes about that. Is they'll tell me like, I did this diet, 10 years ago. Can I just do that? And I'm like, no, because, well, I mean, yes, you could if you wanted to. And then in another 10 years, going to be exactly where you are now. You probably want to try something new if you want to get something new. So I have that discussion all the time. Is nothing comes from nothing. You have to do new to get new. And some of the new that you try isn't going to work. And that's okay. As you're working through finding the right diet for yourself, as you run into hurdles, obstacles, issues, remind yourself that it's okay. And it's a necessary part of the process. So one of my clients, they are wanting to lose weight, but they're in a crazy season of life, and they're just missing all their meals. Well, funny enough, the reason why they got overweight was because they missed all their meals. We talked about the concept of inconsistent eating, which is why most people are overweight. Most people aren't overweight because they just chronically overeat at every meal of the day. Most people undereat throughout the day, overeat at night. Undereat throughout the day, overeat at night. And slowly your body takes those extra calories in the evenings and stores it as body fat, and you get fatter over time. So you're not getting fat because you're overeating every meal. You're getting fat because you're undereating some meals and overeating some meals. You're inconsistently eating. This client is doing the same damn thing again. So we talked about it, and we're like, hey, if I do the same, I'm going to get the same, so I got to do new to get new. They've hit into a busy season of life, and now they're missing meals. They're repeating past mistakes. They're going to get exactly what they got the last time they did that. So we're trying new approaches, trying new foods, putting meals into their work schedule. So as they would schedule a meal, like a meeting at 9, I have them scheduling their meal at 9:30, literally in their work schedule. Now, if you have a publicly shared work schedule, you're probably not going to want to do that. I could understand that. So you got to make sure you're mindful of scheduling it either on your phone, on a separate like calendar that's next to your work computer. But you got to schedule your food. I told her to talk with her spouse to help make meals when she's busy. If she's working right till the edge of, the workday at 5, and then she's supposed to get off work and then cook dinner for everybody, have the freaking, spouse cook the food. Work as a team. You're supposed to be freaking teammates. Help each other out, So talk to your spouse, ask them what you need that maybe they can help you with, and then offer if there's anything that you can help them with. It's teamwork. So we're trying new tactics so that she can get to a new place in her journey. You must do new to get new. And in the new that you do, you may fail. And that's okay. There was a great quote by Thomas Edison, and he invented the light bulb. Good Lord. I hope so, because for some reason now I'm like questioning whether that's actually why he was famous. Good Lord, my brain is done. But he invented a lot of things, and I think one was the light bulb. So, and one of his quotes, which I love, is, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And I love that quote. I use the quote so often that I forgot why he was famous. Good old American education. But that is a great quote, is, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Really, when we look at the title of the podcast today, to find the best diet, you must fail. I use that term, like failure, because it kind of evokes emotion and people might listen to it. So it's a little bit of a, kind of cliffhanger or whatever, like a hook to kind of bait you in, to listen to the podcast. But it's not really failure if you don't stop. Right? Failure is when we try something, it doesn't go the way we wanted, and then we just stop trying. If you are trying things, they don't work, and then you try new things. They don't work, then you try new things. They don't work, then you try new things. That's not failure. You're just in the process of it, right? You're figuring it out. You're in the journey. That's why I love that quote. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's the mindset that you want to have as you continue to work through the journey of finding the best way for you to eat. Continue to find all the ways that don't work. Be happy when you find a way that doesn't work, so that way you can eventually find the way that does. Okay? So to find the best diet, you must fail. Yeah, you're going to run into things. You're going to try some things that aren't going to work. That's okay. Remember the quote, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Continue to do new if you want to get new. Okay, keep going, keep pushing, keep driving. If you have any questions, if you need anything, reach out. My email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And then if you like the information we share in our podcast, so you can find more from us on our social media channels, you can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Jim. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.